Let us read this scripture lesson here before we pray. And it's taken from Psalms 27, familiar scripture, just a voice. It said, the Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom should I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom should I be afraid? It said, when the wicked, even my enemies and my foes came up upon me to eat up my flesh, they stumbled and fell. Say, though an host should encamp against me, my heart should not fear. The war should rise up against me. In this will I be comfort. I want to say this morning. I want to just say something from the late Sir Lyndon. We know that he was one of the greatest prime minister the Commonwealth of Bahamas ever had. A man of wisdom and a man of sight. Amen? And this is one of Sir Lyndon's scriptures. Sir Lyndon, I listened to one of his speech the other day, and he was talking about members of Parliament. And there's a little nugget I want to share with you all this morning. And he said that one day he hoped that all members of Parliament will stop. They say me now, this is Lyndon, go back. Stop talking about one another. That's what he said, and bringing people business in the house family. So Lyndon said it. And he's quoted scripture. He said, the Lord is my light and my salvation. Now, we have another great prime minister here, my cousin, the Honorable Philip Brave Davis. I could not wait until he became prime minister. And you're doing a good job. I think it's 8 months now. Stay on the wall, don't come down. Amen. Then we have a lot of people want to be leaders. Wait on your time. Amen. Okay, y'all gone quiet. Huh? Wait on your time. And I want to say this. I have to drop this in here. And during the general election, I know many of y'all in here. I know y'all before y'all became members of Parliament. Some of y'all was here with me through sickness and in death. And you're my friends. Just like the deputy leader, Cartwright. Then you got my cousin, which is the leader of the opposition. Took care of Allen, man. Great God, I can't wait till the bell ring. And I want to say this, and many of y'all knew, I am not the regular chaplain. Okay? Many of y'all knew during the election, I told y'all that the Progressive Liberal Party will win 32 seats. Some of y'all witnessed, I told y'all that who are here now will become members of Parliament. Y'all could contest, but I want to say this to y'all that put God first. They're going quiet. Put God first in everything. And whatever you do, remember the people of your constituency. Love them. So Lyndon said that he prayed that all men become as one. And he was one of the greatest prime minister. And every prime minister I have met, and I told them that they will be prime minister. They are, some of who you talking about, I ain't talking about you. So I'm going to drink water. I can mind my own business. So let us pray. Lock your chest, your neck on your chest or your breast, whatever you got, just bow your head. Father, we thank you for this day, this beautiful day, that the 20th day of this month that we have never seen before. God, we ask you right now, God, to intervene upon us. We thank you, God, for everything, God, that you're doing in this place. God, we ask you, God, to bless our Prime Minister. Cover him under your that whatever he do, God, he will do it in the right way. The government, the opposition, Lord. We thank you. We give you all the praise and all the glory, God. Because one thing we know, God, that whatever you do is well done. And thou hast taught us to say, children.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread.
And forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. May the peace of God be with you all, that passes all understanding.
Philip Davis, Chester Cooper, Fred Mitchell, Glennis Hannah Martin, Obadiah Wilstrom, Alfred Sayers, Dr. Michael Darville, Clay Sweeting, Keith Bell, Wayne Monroe, Vaughn Miller, Jobeth Colby Davis, Ginger Moxie, Mario Boleg, Jomo Campbell, Basil McIntosh, Miles Maroda, Pia Glover Roll, Lisa Ramming, Zane Lightbourne, Dr. Hubert Minnis, Jamal Strawn, John Pinder, Marcus Roll, Leon Lundy, Kirk Cornish, Wade Watson, Leonardo Lightbourne, Leslie Miller Bryce, Leroy Major, Sylvanus Petty, Mikhail Bonnaby, Michael Pintard, James Kwesi Thompson, Aram Lewis, Shannon Cartwright, Adrian Gibson, Adrian White.
Good morning, members. We will now begin the order of business. Introduction and swearing in of new members. Laying of documents by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for West Grand Bahama and Bimini.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following: the Price Control General Amendment Number 3 Regulations 2022.
Order that the document be brought up. Thank you. Order the document to lie on the table. Further laying out.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following: the Public Holidays Easter Monday 2022 Opening of Shops Notice 2022.
Thank you, honorable member. Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document to lie on the table. Further laying.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following: Currency Notes and Coins Amendment Order 2022.
Thank you, honorable member. Order that the document be brought up. Thank you. Order that the document to lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Pinewood.
Madam Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following: the Health Services COVID-19 Prevention and Management of Community Spread Services Amendment Number 10, Rules 2022.
Thank you, honorable member. Order that the document be brought up. Thank you. Order that the document to lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers. The chair recognizes no further laying. Statements and communications by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador.
Madam Speaker, I am pleased to rise today to communicate to honorable members a vision and a framework to guide digital asset policy in the Bahamas, as laid out in a white paper my government is publishing today, and which I should lay on the table today as well. The digital assets made possible by blockchain technology represent an extraordinary innovation and are rapidly transforming the world's financial infrastructure. The cryptocurrency market is now worth more than $3 trillion. Digital assets are a remarkable opportunity for our country, an opportunity to leverage and build on our world-class financial services expertise, diversify our economy, engage a whole new generation of Bahamians, and lead the way in innovation. Digital assets are going to have a transformative impact across the globe, and we believe that the Bahamas and Bahamians can be at the vanguard of this new frontier. Madam Speaker, our country's economic recovery is already underway, but we cannot sit still. We cannot delude ourselves into thinking that the old economic models are a sufficient basis for dynamic, inclusive growth and prosperity. In the blueprint for change, we put forward and we put before the Bahamian people, we highlighted the importance of a well-regulated environment for cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology. My government's initial success in attracting significant digital asset businesses is only the beginning. We have a vision to transform the Bahamas into the leading digital asset hub in the Caribbean and a global leader in the progressive regulation of businesses in this profoundly innovative space. This white paper is a comprehensive policy update and is the product of a consultative process that extensively engaged the Central Bank of the Bahamas, the Securities Commission of the Bahamas, the Bahamas Financial Services Board, and industry, legal, and financial experts. The white paper lists the following policy objectives. 1, to explore new opportunities in a rapidly and continuously evolving digital asset landscape, including developments in decentralized finance, better known as DeFi, and non-fungible tokens, NFTs, stable coins, and asset reference tokens. 2, to improve the attractiveness of the Bahamas as a well-regulated jurisdiction where well-run digital asset businesses of any size can operate, grow, and prosper. 3, where necessary, to clarify and expand the scope of the current legislative framework generally and the DARE Act in particular, to continue to safely regulate digital assets and digital asset businesses. 4, to encourage innovation in the fintech space and identify emerging technologies that would help maintain the Bahamas' competitive advantage. To explore linkages between the Bahamas' existing financial services sector toolkit, that is corporate and fiduciary services, and to facilitate continued innovation in the international financial services sector. To develop the skills and expertise necessary to fill jobs created in the Bahamian digital asset sector. To work with the Central Bank of the Bahamas to ensure that policies are adjusted to clarify to enable Bahamians to access digital assets in Bahamian dollars. To build capacity and expand the resources of the Securities Commission in order to support and enhance its role as the preeminent digital asset regulator, and to enable it to become a global center of excellence in the pragmatic, risk-adjusted regulation of digital assets and digital asset businesses. And finally, to provide sustainable funding for our digital asset policies, initiatives, and programs. Madam Speaker, taken together, fulfillment of these objectives will encourage the growth of an exciting new industry while protecting consumers, businesses, and investors. They will also offer safeguards against systemic risk which may emerge. They will also help to promote and defend the competitiveness of the Bahamas and offer new opportunities for Bahamians and international investors alike. We wish for our country and our people to be seen as innovators, to stand among the first and best as a great place to do business. The policy white paper, Madam Speaker, highlights the positive potential economic impact of an expanded digital asset sector. It also highlights the role that potential growth in the sector can play in helping to rebuild the Bahamian economy. Post-Dorian and post-COVID, there's much damage to be repaired. This potential economic benefit is, in fact, a central motivation for the development of this digital asset policy. Madam Speaker, while we recognize the extraordinary opportunities afforded by digital assets, we also recognize the risks. And thus, we emphasize the importance of effective regulation. We will attract the best companies and keep out the bad actors. Digital assets companies associated with our jurisdiction must operate fairly and in the interest of its customers. We must ensure that customers' money and assets are properly safeguarded and that measures are in place to detect and prevent financial crime. In doing so, at the same time, the Bahamas will be meeting its international obligations, upholding our reputation, and mitigating the inevitable risks associated with the introduction of new technologies. Madam Speaker, our white paper also envisions the establishment of a digital advisory panel to keep digital assets development, emerging trends, and associated risks constantly under review. The panel will be charged with keeping the government, the Digital Asset Policy Committee, and appropriate regulators fully updated with relevant information. They will be expected to recommend any necessary changes to policy, the DARE Act, and other legislation to ensure that the Bahamas maintains its place as a well-regulated digital asset jurisdiction, while at the same time continuing to remain relevant and attractive for digital asset businesses to operate from, to grow, and to prosper. Madam Speaker, the remaining parts of the white paper speak more broadly to the wider context of digital assets in the Bahamas. Of enormous importance to me are the policy proposals in Part 6. We propose to expand the range of sector-specific academic, professional, and vocational opportunities in education. This is vital to ensure that Bahamians are well-placed and best placed to secure positions in this exciting new industry. We will promote closest collaboration between the University of the Bahamas, the private sector, and the regulators to develop crypto assets courses to both certificate and degree level. I trust the whole House and the Bahamian people will share my fervent desire that the widest possible number of Bahamians benefit from this opportunity. In Part 7 of the white paper, we set out how we wish Bahamians to be able to access digital assets in B dollars and encourage greater use of the sand dollars. Part 8 seeks to integrate our digital asset policy with our wider policy around climate change. We propose to introduce incentives for digital assets that prioritize more energy-efficient digital use to help mitigate the effects of greenhouse gases. We'll also explore the feasibility of establishing a system of carbon credits and the establishment of a Caribbean carbon market. This would potentially employ distributed bed ledgers for all blockchain technology and operate within the Bahamas digital asset regime. Madam Speaker, a commitment is made at Part 9 to provide the necessary resources for the Securities Commission to continue building capacity and to meet the growing demand to regulate and supervise an increasing number of global digital asset businesses. At Part 10, we undertake to consider, in consultation with relevant stakeholders, the introduction of a training and development levy in order to provide a sustainable source of revenue for the initiatives within the policy. And finally, Madam Speaker, as has been hinted at throughout, in Part 11, the paper makes a specific commitment to adopt an approach which is proportionate, risk-adjusted, and balanced. This approach should take a joined-up, multi-stakeholder approach, one that considers all policy objectives and outcomes. In this way, it is anticipated that our approach to digital assets will be fully integrated into the wider policy objectives of the government. Madam Speaker, what we propose is truly innovative. We are determined to set the Bahamas on a path fully fit for the 21st century and beyond that truly delivers on that brighter future for all. Madam Speaker, I would, Madam Speaker, with your leave, lay the policy document along with my communication. Sorry.
Thank you, Honourable. Thank you, Honourable Member. Order that the documents be brought up.
Madam Speaker.
Order the documents do lie on the table. Thank you.
Further communication.
Further communication.
Speaker, this relates to the climate change and carbon markets initiatives bill to be laid. Madam Speaker, upon coming to office in September 2021, almost exactly 7 months ago, my administration immediately began to highlight issues connected to climate change and the Bahamas. 6 days into office, I addressed the General Assembly of the United Nations. While many leaders were focused on the global pandemic, I wanted the world to remember that when COVID arrived on our shores, my country was still reeling from the catastrophic impact of Hurricane Dorian. Most importantly, I wanted to remind world leaders that the intensity of Dorian was almost certainly the result of climate change. The warming waters and above average temperatures caused by human emissions means that storms like Dorian linger longer and cause more damage. 2 months later, at the World Leaders Summit during COP26 in Glasgow, I made this point to my fellow leaders. Small island developing states like ours, which are hit hardest by the impact of climate change, are the least responsible. But I didn't just want to focus on the problem. I also wanted to drive home the importance of the need for the world to act. Madam Speaker, our administration has not been content to sit on the global sidelines, leaving our fate in the hands of others. My government will continue to make the case for urgent action. And in this, I am pleased to say that there are signs that the world is noticing. The Bahamian people are more engaged around the issues of climate change than ever before. And the voice of the Bahamas is now being heard more frequently and with more impact than ever before. As the world moves forward to address the causes of climate change, we intend to play an active and powerful role in charting the way forward. Madam Speaker, this climate change carbon initiatives bill that I intend to lay seeks to participate in the global response to the threat of climate change in ways which will also be of compensatory, practical, and environmental benefit to the Bahamas. Before I go further, I wish to share some basic facts regarding the science surrounding climate change. Successive reports by the United Nations and a host of international organizations point to the role of carbon emissions in causing temperatures to rise on our planet. If I might quote from one of the UN's climate action fact sheets, and I quote, in a 2018 report, thousands of scientists and government reviewers agreed that limiting global temperatures rise to no more than 1.5 degrees centigrade would help us avoid the worst climate impacts and maintain a livable climate. Yet the current path of carbon dioxide emissions could increase global temperatures by as much as 4.4 degrees centigrade by the end of the century, close quotes. Since that 2018 report, climate risk has intensified and the situation has grown more urgent. It is for this reason that a growing coalition of countries is committing to reducing their carbon emissions to zero by 2050. Madam Speaker, even though the carbon emissions that cause climate change are produced from all parts of the world, some countries produce far more than others. Example, the 100 lowest carbon emitting countries in the world, which include the Bahamas, together produce only 3% of global emissions. At the other end of the scale, the 10 highest carbon emitting countries produce 68% of emissions. What happens in those high emission countries doesn't stay in those high emission countries. Those emissions lead to the climate change which poses existential risk to countries such as ours. 3 critical framework agreements now guide the global response as to how the world should respond to this existential threat, and the Bahamas participates in them all. They are the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the Paris Agreement, and the agreement reached after the recent negotiations at the 26th Conference of the Parties in Glasgow. One of the key outcomes in the discussions in Glasgow was agreement that significant financial support is needed for our country and others to mitigate and adapt to the effects of climate change. And central to that agreement was the recognition that an important tool to support these efforts is engagement in carbon markets. Madam Speaker, carbon markets set a price for a unit of carbon dioxide, which can then be traded between a buyer and seller. At COP26, after 6 years of negotiations, countries finally agreed on rules for international cooperation through carbon markets. The new rules, as outlined in Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, state that countries around the world could trade units, that is carbon credits, with one another in order to access more cost-effective emissions reductions, or in the case of the Bahamas, to sell excess emissions credits. The Bahamas has significant resources that, with conservation and restoration, can remove carbon from the Earth's atmosphere. The sale of carbon credits can aid the country in further protecting our seagrasses, mangroves, forests, and coral reefs. This means that high carbon emitting countries could buy credits from us, both compensating us for the role our country can play as a carbon sink and reducing the overall total amount of carbon being emitted into the atmosphere. Carbon markets are an important bridge to a net zero future. In our Blueprint for Change, the platform we put before the people and on which we were elected, we pledged to secure carbon credit payments for our country. This bill marks the first step in doing just that. Another step in delivering a new day for the Bahamian people. Madam Speaker, at present, the goal is for all countries to reach net zero by 2050. This provides the Bahamas with essentially 28 years to optimally benefit from the carbon market initiatives. While guidance on the implementation of the framework agreements will take time to be fully developed, a vibrant, voluntary carbon credit marketplace already exists. This voluntary carbon market allows eco-conscious companies to offset their emissions beyond what is required by any government. 1 in 5 of the world's 2,000 largest publicly traded companies have now committed themselves to a net zero emissions target. As many businesses and multinational companies have been directed by their shareholders to engage in stronger environmental, social, and governance practices, commonly called just ESG, the provisions of Bahamian carbon credits would prove of mutual benefit for our country and these private sector entities. And that is on what they call the voluntary carbon market. The first step is to map out scientifically the mangroves, the seagrasses, and forests that are functioning or could function as a carbon sink. That is, functioning to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. While this mapping and verification process is taking place, we need to set up the legal and financial frameworks that can ensure that any resulting carbon credits are managed in the best interest of the Bahamian people. That is the goal of the legislation we lay before the House today. Madam Speaker, we will be laying the bill at the appropriate time on the agenda.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
Order that the document be brought up. Order the document to lie on the table. Further statement and communication by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Garden Hills.
Madam Speaker, I rise in this honorable house as the great representative of the people of the great constituency of Garden Hills and the Minister of Youth, Sports and Culture. Madam Speaker, I also rise to boast of the greatness of our country and Bahamian citizens, to brag about the success achieved by our junior athletes who are true ambassadors, those young men and women who wore the colors of the Bahamian flag with pride this past weekend. Madam Speaker, we all know that the global coronavirus pandemic has had a significant impact on sports at all levels, affecting the daily routine of athletes and rescheduling competitions, and the annual Carifta Championships was one of those competitions that was interrupted. Thankfully, it was able to resume this past weekend after 2 years hiatus. The Carifta swimming was held in Bridgetown, Barbados, and track and field was held in Kingston, Jamaica. I would like to thank both countries for being a great host and providing our junior athletes, as well as other junior athletes from the Caribbean, with an avenue and arena to compete in. Madam Speaker, the best junior swimmers in the region are Bahamians. The best junior swim program in the region is the Bahamas Aquatic Federation. Madam Speaker, the 36-member team that represented this great country is a part of history with a combined team score of 975 points. The Bahamas splashed to their 4th consecutive Carifta swim title. Team Bahamas has 7 Carifta titles, 2007, 14, 15, 17, 18, 19, and only because of the absence, we now in 2022. Madam Speaker, the Bahamas won 65 medals, 14 golds, 22 silvers, and 29 bronze. This talented group of young men and women was led by head coach Giovanni McPhee, assisted by coaches Cameron and Andrew Levette. The team managers and chaperones were Andrea Sturp and Courtney Barr and Patrick Ferguson. Madam Speaker, the young swimmer Caden Wells, who competed in the boys 13 and 14, quickly emerged as the new star for that division. He won the first medal of this year's championships for the Bahamas and did a clean sweep in the backstroke events. The Bahamas also won all of the relays in this age division. The quartet assembled, which varied for the event, was just unstoppable. Veteran swimmers Errol Thompson II, Nigel Forbes proved why they are the team leaders. Kenan Moss, Mia Patton, Will Farrington, Rashani Gibbs, Marvin Johnson, Zaylee Elizabeth Thompson are just few of our swimmers who did an excellent job in Barbados. Madam Speaker, it was unfortunate that our Carifta water polo team did not get an opportunity to compete. The Bahamas was getting set to defend their title in that arena also. The success at these championships would have been another historic feat for the Bahamas Aquatics Federation, which the team falls under. Madam Speaker, the new Carifta record was set on opening day of the track and field competition, and it was done by a Bahamian, Keyshawn Strawn, who hails from the island of Andros. Keyshawn's
Lundy.
Keyshawn's marking in the under-20 boys javelin through 79.89 meters is the world's leading distance for that age group. Joining me in the stands to witness this historic throw was the Member of Parliament for North Andros and the Berry Islands, Mr. Leonardo Lightburn. My colleagues also got an opportunity to watch 5 more of his constituents compete in the various events. Inking her name into Carifta's history book was young Dory Scott. This under-17 girls javelin thrower competed in her first Carifta, breaking a long-distance record. Dory threw was 44.57 meters. Madam Speaker, let me be the first to inform you that Dory is a basketball player. A young, talented national basketball player. She attends St. Augustine's College and has led a team to a number of BAISS championship titles. She also lives in Elizabeth Estates constituency and has the support of her Member of Parliament, the Honorable Jobert Colby Davis, who was also on hand to witness her performance. Madam Speaker, this was just 2 of many outstanding performances by a 54-member track and field team. This resilient group of young men and women performed exceptionally well, despite the adversity and challenges faced. Raising the bar were Mr. Vanderpool, who won the pole vault event, and Mitchell Curtis got a gold in the 5,000 meter. Overall, the team Bahamas finished second with 4 golds, 6 silver, 7 bronze for the total of 17 medals. The accomplishments of these 2 teams will not go unnoticed. The track and field team are back as they arrived safely last night. Our swim team will be in country today at 3 p.m. I invite you and my colleagues, entire parliamentary team, and the entire Bahamas to welcome them at the airport and join my ministry at the reception today at 5 p.m. at the National Stadium. Yeah. Madam Speaker, the well-known proverbs say, it takes a village to raise a child. Many question why my colleagues joined me down in Jamaica and why I was represented in Barbados by the Honorable Keith Bell, who I graciously thank to sit in place for me. I cannot be cloned, and I only can be one place at a time. I'm here to say that the support must come fundamentally from the leadership, and this Prime Minister, Mr. Philip Brave Davis, and I, Chester Cooper, led administration will help athletes maximize their opportunities, minimize their performance constraints. We are here for all Bahamian athletes, whether they are competing locally, regionally, or internationally. I would like to personally thank the Prime Minister of the Bahamas, the Honorable Philip Brave Davis, and the Honorable Keith Bell, and I pause to make mention of the Honorable Jobert Colby Davis. While in Kingston, Jamaica, I will get to here. But while the Minister of Transport was in Jamaica, hold on 1 second, this phone playing crazy. While she was in Kingston, Jamaica, the Honorable Jobert Colby Davis toured one of the island's largest hosting subdivision in Spanish Town, St. Catharines, as well as 2 modern hosting designs being built for young professionals, townhome, and condominium designs. The government of Jamaica is on a mission to provide 70,000 affordable housing solutions over the next 5 years. Minister Colby Davis toured the subdivision to learn best practices and to exchange ideas on affordable housing solutions. Minister Colby Davis remains resolute in a commitment to delivering quality, affordable homes to Bahamian people. Also, I would like to thank the Honorable Pierre Glover Rule, Member of Parliament for Golden Gates, while 2 on the island of Jamaica, celebrating with us at the 49th Grifter. She continued to dialogue plans of best practice and benefits that can benefit women in leadership around the Caribbean and opportunities to support domestic violence programs in the Bahamas. I look forward to the continued mutual beneficial empowerment plans that are forthcoming. Ms. Glover Rule met with some of the most beneficial and well-known female politicians on the island of Jamaica, along with Ms. Colby Davis. We also thank the Honorary Consul, Ms. Alvita Knight, for arranging and accompanying them in these various meetings. The power of cooperative at work amongst women in Caribbean region is existing. Madam Speaker, this village is committed to seeing all athletes, Bahamians as a whole, grow. We are here and will continue to follow them and support them in their careers. Madam Speaker, this is just the beginning of great things to come of our athletes and country, and as they say in Jamaica, big things are going. The Bahamas finished second in the 49th edition of the Grifter Track and Field Championships. Madam Speaker, I'm happy and very proud to know that the Honorable Prime Minister accompanied me to deliver us hosting the 50th anniversary next year. While we settled for second in the 49th, we know quite well that in the 50th, on our own home soil, we intend to bring home the victory and celebrate the 50th anniversary of this Grifter as we coincide with the 50th anniversary of our independence. Madam Speaker, I close with the phrase used by our Bahamian athletes so well, and I hope the Prime Minister could assist me with this, but they would say 242 to the world, and then they will go brrr, what they say, bang! Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Would you like to lay that document? Or that the document be brought up? Order the document to lie on the table. Further statement and communications by ministers? No further statement. Communications by the clerk? Messages from the Governor General? Messages from the Senate? I see 3 here. 3 messages. The 3. I'm tabling from the Senate messages number 7 and number 9. Order that they do lie on the table. Motions for leave of absence, leave to resign, seat, and new writs. Presentations of petitions. Presentation of reports of committees. Adoption of reports of committees. First reading of bills. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumpke, and San Salvador.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a copy of the following: a bill for an act to give effect to the Paris Agreement to aid in the global response to the threat of climate change and to create and implement initiatives to offset carbon emissions.
Order the document be brought up. Is there a seconder?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a first time and tabled. All those in favor shall remain seated. Those opposed will stand. As many? Order that the bill be read a first time and tabled.
A bill for an act.
Sorry.
A bill for an act to give effect to the Paris Agreement to aid in the global response to the threat of climate change and to create and implement initiatives to offset carbon emissions.
For the first reading of bills, Chair recognizes the honorable member for Fox Hill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a bill for an act to amend the Evidence Act to provide for the presumption of death where a person disappeared in circumstances of peril. I so move.
Thank you, honorable member. Order that the document be brought up.
Second.
Thank you, honorable member. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for the first time and tabled. All those in favor shall remain seated. Those opposed will stand. I order that the bill be read for the first time and tabled.
A bill for an act to amend the Evidence Act to provide for the presumption of death where a person disappears in circumstances of peril.
For the first reading, order the document line.
I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a copy of the following: a bill for an act to amend the International Business Companies Act.
Second.
Thank you, honorable members. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for the first time and tabled. All those in favor shall remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Order that the bill be read for the first time and tabled.
A bill for an act to amend the International Business Companies Act.
For the first reading of bills,
I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a copy of the following: a bill for an act to amend the Exempted Limited Partnership Act.
Second.
thank you, honorable members. Order that the document be brought up. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for the first time and tabled. All those in favor shall remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Order that the bill be read for the first time and tabled.
A bill for an act to amend the Exempted Limited Partnership Act.
Thank you. For the first readings?
No further.
No further first reading. Second reading and committal of bills.
Madam Speaker, I wish now to move for the second reading of several bills that will be contained in a compendium.
Yes, sir.
The Magistrates Bill, Juries Bill, Evidence Bill, and the Criminal Procedure Code Bill amendments. With the concurrence of the opposition, we intend to debate as a compendium of bills.
Okay. Thank you, honorable member.
Thank you.
Which bill are we moving forth with first, honorable member?
Evidence and criminal.
The evidence?
Together with criminal procedure.
Right.
The second reading? Second reading of bills? The chair recognizes the honourable member for Freetown.
Yep. So, Fred, excuse me.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to move for the second reading of the following bill.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to move the second reading of the Evidence Amendment Bill 2022. With your leave, Madam Speaker, before I move directly to the debate of this bill, rising as I do, representing the great people of the Freetown constituency, I'd wish to offer my condolences to the family of Kenneth Musgrove of Sutton Street, who was tragically killed over the Lenten period. We pray that his soul find repose. I also, with your leave, Madam Speaker, would like to thank the officers and branch members of Freetown who assisted at our Easter event on Saturday on Salem Park for the young and the young at heart. Their assistance is greatly appreciated. Also, wish to thank Dominique Bowe, who put on an Easter event for the children again in Freetown. We trust that everyone reflects not on the festivities, but on the real meaning of Easter, which is the foundation of our faith. Finally, Madam Speaker, with your leave, I could not pass remarking and noting up the birthday of a Centurion. And that Centurion is a former police corporal retired, a former worker in the judicial department, in the person of Mr. Charles McKinney, who was Corporal 90 on the Royal Bahamas Police Force, who celebrated his 102nd birthday yesterday. He was acknowledged and feted by a team led by two strong women, the Deputy to the Governor General, Cynthia Mother Pratt, and the Acting Commissioner of Police, Loretta Mackey. As he was a former police officer, Madam Speaker, the police honored their own, and Commissioner Mackey was joined by Assistant Commissioners Kirkwood Andrews, Delarice Ferguson, and Kenwood Taylor. They took festivities to him, and the Royal Bahamas Police Force sent members as well in the person of Assistant Superintendent Eric Fowler, who led the team. Mr. McKinney was serenaded by saxophonist Sergeant 3221 Lyndon Sands and by Sergeant 315 Keva Major in song. He was blessed by the force chaplain, Father Stephen Davies, and was assisted with a birthday cake, 5 boxes of grocery items, a Royal Bahamas Police Force shield, and to remind him of his days as a policeman, a police notebook given by a group led by Chief Superintendent Anthony Roll and Superintendent Audley Peters. He has come a long way in giving service. He gave 21 years service to the Royal Bahamas Police Force and a total of 40 years service to the country. I wish him well in his ensuing years. If one looks at the video on the Royal Bahamas Police Force Facebook page, he seems to have many more good years in him for the look of what you see on the video. I now move, Madam Speaker, to the Evidence Amendment Bill. I have no shame in saying that I've been asked by my former junior, the member for Centerville. I've been directed by him and the member for West End to deputize for him in this effort. It always gives me great pride and satisfaction, Madam Speaker, to discharge in this place the Article 52(1) duty and power of this House. And the Constitution provides that we are to make laws for the peace, order, and good government of this great country. And these bills are a step in that direction. One will find when one considers the Evidence Amendment Bill that it seeks to close what one may call a loophole that may be said to exist in existing laws. I can attest, Madam Speaker, that you may make any good laws you wish, but you must make sure not to leave any avenue for wiggle room and questions in their interpretation and application. That must be a preoccupation of this House, not only to have good ideas, but to ensure that when we document them, we do so in a manner to be effective. The whole purpose of the Evidence Amendment Bill dovetails quite nicely with a current initiative being championed by the current Chief Justice in an expansion of the virtual court premises currently located at the Bahamas Department of Corrections ground. Currently, the facility is too small, as it has to service all of the Magistrates Court in New Providence and in Grand Bahama. It has to service all of the Supreme Court sitting on their criminal sides. And during the pandemic, it came also to service the Bahamas Court of Appeal. And so, Madam Speaker, the efficiency of using live video link has promoted efficiency in the dispatch of the court's business on both the criminal and the civil side. The Evidence Amendment Bill, in its terms, changes the definition from live television link to video link. And this is accomplished by Clause 2, which amends Section 2 of the Principal Act. And we will find that it defines video link as meaning a live television link, which we had previously, or an internet link, which we've progressed to, or any other arrangement that will allow the court and the parties basically to see each other simultaneously by means of visual perception and oral perception. And so this definition is an expansion on what was previously permitted. And we've all seen the progress from live television link to internet platforms that currently operate in the court. And so this is to give the broadest development possible as we develop the infrastructure of a virtual court. We must also develop the law. The rest of the bill is built around these changes to replacing live television link with live video link. There is an advancement in the bill by the amendment of Section 78A, which is amended by Clause 4, and that expressly extends video links to all courts, and they are listed: the Juvenile Court, the Magistrates Court, the Supreme Court, and the Court of Appeal. And so this technology will be available now in all of the courts. To be clear, to anyone practicing in this arena or to the casual observer, this must bode well. We all well remember the days when you would have 2 and 3 buses screaming down from prison in rush hour and screaming back. The only purpose, the main purpose being to deliver accused to a remand hearing that lasted all of 5 minutes, with all of the attending manpower and security provision thereby attending. This technology that has been used for some time alleviates that. Anyone who would have practiced would be well aware of traveling to Grand Bahama or Abaco for a court hearing that was very short, and arriving in Grand Bahama or Abaco only to discover that the accused person was still in New Providence. This will permit ease of doing business with the Family Islands. And so it is a development that is to be advanced, but must be done so in an ironclad manner. The rest of this bill, in terms of the amendment of Section 78B, 78C, is meant to permit anyone to give evidence by video link, inclusive of the accused. Previously, the accused would only give evidence in person. When we come to debate the amendment to the Criminal Procedure Code, there is a consequential amendment there that will permit now an accused to give evidence even if he misconducts himself so that he is excluded from the actual place of the trial, either because he carries on badly, he interrupts the court, or any such matter. And so this accommodates then complete trials. The schedule to the bill that replaces the schedule in the Principal Act sets out all of the safeguards that will be necessary to protect the rights of the parties and the rights of the accused. There is provision now for video recording of testimony from child witnesses, and the amendments to this bill will permit the cross-examination based on those recordings to also be done by video link. This, Madam Speaker, in my estimation, having gone through it, and I looked at it in the same way, not as the Minister of National Security, but I looked at it in the sense of any of those clever lawyers that I left in practice, as I practice no more these days, but how they would seek to find something in this. I'm pleased to say, Madam Speaker, and say to the country that using all of the skills developed over 30 years, I have thus far been unable to find any way that one could attack the provisions of this amending bill that provides for efficiency in trials, savings of cost, manpower, and other cost. And I therefore, Madam Speaker, would commend it to this House as an appropriate amendment to modernize and update the giving of evidence where persons are not present in person to give that evidence. And I so commend it to the House, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Is there a seconder?
Sorry.
He recognizes the Honourable Member for Freetown.
I'll be.
He's
Yes.
Okay.
Although I may be senior at some things, Madam Speaker, some persons point out that I am junior in other respects. And I would seek leave, Madam Speaker, to move for the second reading of the Criminal Procedure Code Amendment Bill 2022, so that these may be debated as a compendium.
Okay. I don't want to read that.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
Yes, I have that as well. Yeah. Madam Speaker, and honourable members, as foreshadowed previously, the The Criminal Procedure Code Amendment Bill 2022 is another part of the solution to updating giving of evidence virtually. The provisions of the bill, as with the amendments to the Evidence Act, replaces live television link with video link, a term that is more expansive than live television link and is exactly the same definition as one finds in the Evidence Act. The change affected here, Madam Speaker, is a repeal and a replacement of Section 115 of the Criminal Procedure Code Act that permitted the appearance of accused persons in court and to be represented by counsel. This expands the ability for an accused person to be represented in court through video link, with all of the attendant benefits, Madam Speaker. One will find with these two bills put together an experience that was very common when I acted as a Supreme Court judge. The first trial that I presided over involved a witness giving evidence from the United States of America from our High Commission in Miami. I participated in cases where witnesses gave evidence from the convenience of family islands in which they reside. These bills taken together permit that degree of efficiency, savings of costs, that can only augur well for us as we seek to attack the backlog of cases that exist in the system. Any step, and I repeat, any step that saves 1 minute is a good step, because minutes adds up, Madam Speaker. And so, again, I've looked at these two bills together, and as a group, they effectively permit evidence to be given by accused persons from wherever they are by video link, either because they're at the virtual court building in the Eastern District, or because they have been excluded from a trial here because of their misbehavior. And I would commend this amending bill together with the Evidence Act to this House. I've examined them, and I have not been able to detect any chink in the armor of this step in modernizing the way that we conduct trials in this country. And I would commend this bill to this House as well, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
With your leave, Madam Speaker, I would move the second reading of the Jury's Amendment Bill 2022. Madam Speaker, the hallmark of criminal justice in this country is the right to be tried by one's peers. And so the jury forms an essential cog in our criminal justice system. This act makes no major changes to that institution. This bill, seeks to make two basic changes. One, to protect and promote the safety of jurors, and the other, to do away with large piles of paper. If I may address first the provision that addresses the safety of jurors. The public would be used to receiving in the daily newspapers huge stacks of paper that lists the name, the address, the birth date of all potential jurors. If one were to reflect on that for one short moment, one may apprehend that there is a security issue with publishing the address of somebody who is or who may serve as a juror. We live in perilous times, and we cannot be naive about these matters. This bill, by repealing and replacing subsection 7 of section 8 of the Principal Act, which is accomplished by clause 2B, requires only now to be printed the full name of the potential juror and the date of birth of the juror. There is excluded now any requirement to publish the address of the juror. We trust that this will be a step that will give some comfort to persons that they are not addressed plainly in a public space for all of the potentials that may have to bad actors. The other change principally brought by this bill, and I would give notice that in committee there is an intention to consider an amendment of these provisions, is to do away with the need to print in the newspapers the piles of papers that set out what would now be the name and date of birth of jurors. In this time, that is a massive slaughter of wood to produce paper and energy for that end. It is to be published on the website of the judiciary instead now of the government's website by clause 2, as the judiciary is an independent branch of government. The only concern, Madam Speaker and honorable members, is one has concern about persons who look at the paper and get their information largely from the paper. We will have to consider at committee how we address the concerns of those persons who may be getting all of their information about being summoned for jury duty from the newspapers. I would put a marker down that is something that is under consideration. I'm quite certain that with the talent in this place, that is a small problem to surmount. I would therefore, Madam Speaker, commend this bill to this House and honorable members as an improvement in the safety of jurors and a contribution towards less waste of paper and, again, increased efficiency. Again, with your leave, Madam Speaker, I would move the second reading of the Magistrates Amendment Bill 2022. The purpose of this bill, broadly as set out in the objects and reasons, is to increase the jurisdiction of the Magistrates Court with regard monetary levels. When one looks at the current Magistrates Court Act, one would see, firstly, that in order to qualify as a magistrate, a stipendian circuit magistrate, one must have certain qualifications. If one looks at the current magisterial bench, one would find that many, if not all, magistrates possess the qualifications to be judges of the Supreme Court in having 10 years or more of practice. If one considers the statistics, the Magistrates Court disposes of the greatest number of matters before the courts. It is, in effect, the lay person's court, where many people appear without representation. It is vital to the justice system in this country. Alas, Madam Speaker, I think we last changed the jurisdiction of the magistrates, increased it to $5,000 about 2 decades or so ago. Close to 2 decades ago, Madam Speaker, and that was a modest increase. And so the public is confronted with this particular problem. If you have a debt that somebody owes you over $5,000, you are stuck with either suing for only $5,000 in the Magistrates Court or seeking to engage litigation in the Supreme Court, where there are processes that a layman may not be able to easily negotiate, and where one has the ability to have orders for costs made against one that are substantial. These amendments, in effect, will increase the value of claims that can be disposed of in the Magistrates Court for both levels of magistrates, stipendiary and circuit magistrates, and if we ever get back to it, lay magistrates. The definition of small claims is dealt with in Clause 2, and small claims now have a limit for contractual claims of $400. Anything over $400 does not amount to a small claim in the current Magistrates Act. For contract claims, for tort claims, the same $400 limit is set. And for matters that can go to the summary side of the Supreme Court, except title to land, the limit now is $600. The Act raises the claim limit for contract and tort small claims to $5,000, and for the summary side of the Supreme Court to $10,000. One will find in examining the bill that the maximum jurisdiction increase is $20,000, and that is for trials by stipendiary and circuit magistrates by Clause 5. One will find, contrary to what is the view of many lawyers, that questions of title to land can be determined in the Magistrates Court. Currently, the limit there is for property valued at $200. And I don't know of any property in the Bahamas that you could find valued $200. The increase in that area is to $10,000 by Clause 4. And so one will find now, although $10,000 may not seem a lot, it will encompass now the smallest claim where we are rowing over a little sliver of land that when you value it is in fact within the limit of $10,000. And so this will likely, if one were to consider it, permit neighbors who have boundary disputes where it really is just 10 by 10, 10 by 50, to have a summary disposition at low cost in the Magistrates Court. The other major change wrought is an increase in the cost that can be recovered, and that's increased from $500 to $1,500. This still will not cause loads of lawyers to inhabit this court in competition with the lay people who will be representing themselves. There are other small consequential changes that are not, in my judgment, significant, but I would leave it to the debate to determine it. There is an increase in the penalty for not obeying an order of a magistrate other than the payment of money. The current penalty is $5 a day. So if a magistrate orders you to get off your neighbor's property and you do not do it, the most you have to pay is $5 a day. Clause 10 of this bill increases that to $50 a day. If you don't comply with a requisition of a magistrate, the current charge for that is $80. It is proposed that that is increased in Clause 11 to $1,000. So if the magistrate were to ask a powerful company to bring in some document necessary to fairly adjudicate a matter, and they simply refuse. Currently, they pay $80. This amendment would increase it to $1,000. The change by clause 12 to section 54. Currently, there's a right of appeal from a magistrate's decision to a Supreme Court judge. Currently, if the judgment is valued $1 or more, you have a right of appeal. The appeal in the Magistrates Court acts as a stay, and persons have been using it quite oppressively. There is a modest increase in that from $1 to $100. The simple effect of that is if a magistrate gives a judgment against you for $99 or less, you have no right of appeal now. The daily cost on appeals are increased from $50 appearance to $500. No, I'm wrapping up. Okay. There is, by clause 14, an increase in the protection of small persons. Currently in section 78 of the Magistrates Court Act, if a judgment is entered against a person, one can seize and sell their goods up to everything up to $100 of clothing and apparel. And that is increased to $1,500, a protection again for the small man. There is a increase that is just amazing. Clause 16 of the Act. Currently, if you're a witness and you're coming from the Family Islands, or you're coming from somewhere else, you can have conduct money to help you get to court. The current amount of conduct money permitted by the Magistrates Act is 20 cents. You can't catch a bus for 20 cents today. The current level of conduct money by Rule 6 of the first schedule is 20 cents. That is being increased by Clause 16 to $50. And so we still have in these provisions some increase from the 20 cents, but also not too much of an increase to put a burden on the small man. The final provisions deal with the schedule to the Act that deals with fees in civil proceedings. Currently, all of those fees are expressed in cents. So for instance, a summons for witness and copy is 20 cents. A hearing fee is 20 cents. A writ of execution is 30 cents. Taking any affidavit or declaration not intended for a criminal matter is 20 cents. The fees for court officers enacting mileage is 7 cents. And so to drive, mileage is 7 cents and only 7 cents. The seizure of property under a writ of possession is 30 cents. And so one will find in Clause 17 a modest increase in those fees, the largest fee now being $30 for a writ of execution and seizure of property under a writ of execution. I would commend the amendments and the increase to this House as being necessary and reasonable. I would again note up that there's going to be consideration in committee for an amendment to permit an increase in the limit by order as opposed to by an amending bill. And at the appropriate time, Madam Speaker, I trust that again, with all of the talent in this House, we will be able to arrive at a position that is reasonable so that you do not have to come back over and repeatedly in terms of these limits. Some say immediately that the limits are still too low, but that is a matter, Madam Speaker, for debate. But I would commend this bill as well to the House. And Freetown supports all four of the amending bills.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Foxborough.
Commissioner Magistrate, the one I wrote those notes on. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Like they say in the Court of Appeal or in the House of Lords, I've had the advantage of reading and hearing what my learned friend had to say before me. And having had that advantage, I adopt everything he says and I agree. So it's easy for me to move to second what he has proposed just a few minutes ago. But I would like to add some perspective to this and to confirm what he has said about the proposed amendments having regard to our work in caucus and some late advice which we've obtained. We intended to move certain amendments in the committee stage of these bills. But the general view is that it is helpful to the administration of justice that these bills be passed with dispatch. And I say that because I was looking at the Principal Act this morning, the Magistrates Court Act in particular. And the last time these limits were increased was 1994. And I remember that I was in the Senate at the time and had been in practice since 1986 when I came back from law school. And from 1986, had been struggling for a long time to try and get the then administration to raise the limits as they then were in the Magistrates Court. And when the amendments were made in 1994, this was considered by most people in practice then as revolutionary, that we'd in fact raised the limits to $5,000. And even at that time, $5,000 was felt to be unacceptable, was simply too low. And so practitioners have been trying to get this moved and advanced since 1994 to now. And the interesting thing about law, and those of you who have a longer time in this place than I do, ahead of you, will know is when you have, in my view anyway, when you have the chance to do something, you better do it. And don't say, let's come back next week or we'll get back to that, because once the opportunity passes, it takes a long time for a ship of state to deal with matters again. I had said when I was in practice in the 80s that it would seem to me much simpler if it were possible to simply by order, as the circumstances changed, to have these limits adjusted. So you don't have to come back to Parliament to do this every time you need to adjust the limits. There are those then who argued that, well, you need to have Parliament have some sort of scrutiny over these processes. I agree. But that's already been provided for in the law, as I said last week on another occasion, in the Interpretation of General Clauses Act. Anything which is put in place by order, a member of Parliament, either a senator or a member of Parliament, can move a resolution in the House or the Senate to reverse that order. So Parliament has a way of controlling anything that is done by order. So I think it is simply, in my view, better if we can do that. And so some language is being worked on by the draftsman. I think the last time I tried some drafting in here, which is why it has to come back from the Senate. Let's describe it as inartful. But the lawyers told me I didn't know what I was doing, which is the problem of not having a parliamentary draftsman, which I hope our colleagues on the other side will soon agree that this is something we need to do, is to have a parliamentary draftsman here, so that if we run into these issues, we can have someone who's on hand to be able to advise on these matters. So there comes a time, I recall this scene in The Lion in Winter, which is by far my favorite movie. People would hear me talk about it all the time, where the king in his senior years is talking about where he is in life. And he says, you know, one of the beauties that he has as a king is to discover peace, is what he calls a period of peace, because it allowed him to ensure that a peasant got his cow and that land disputes were more equitably settled, and to be able to solve problems for ordinary people, ordinary problems, instead of dealing with the so-called big issues of statecraft. And so this is one of these opportunities, because as the mover of the motion said, most people end up in magistrates court on the civil side trying to adjudicate disputes. And they're disputes not about large, generally speaking, about large sums of money. And what you found is that you could have a dispute with someone who owes you $8,500. And in order to go to the Supreme Court, the first thing is you have to file, I think the filing fee is now $300 in the Supreme Court. And then you have all these arcane rules that you have to follow in order to get the process going and started. And I don't know what the retainer is for an attorney these days to start an action in the Supreme Court, but I would guess it's, you know, somewhere between $1,000, $2,000 to get it started. So in order to collect $8,500, you've got to have $2,000, $2,500 in your hand in order to get a professional to go after that for you. So often people would come to me and I'd say, well, you know, the simplest thing to do in these circumstances is if you're willing to give up the $3,500, you can go to the magistrate's court where you can get summary justice fairly quickly. And, you know, a fellow has to think long and hard about that, because $3,500 is a lot of bucks. That's a lot of money to give up. Somebody owes you. But then you think of all the complications which ensue in trying to prosecute a matter through the Supreme Court. And by the time you actually get a result, you're so far out of pocket that you may say the opportunity cost or the cost to you, it's probably better to just give up on the $3,500 and go to the magistrate's court. So this amendment, which now takes it up to $10,000, would help someone in that position. And I think that that's a good thing that we're able to do that. And it may be that on review, and I hope that the amendment passes on review, it'll be possible as inflation and other things kick in and the realities of the economy kick in, it may be possible to adjust these limits as the circumstances permit. The 10,000 in some respects, 20,000 on the civil proceedings. You're absolutely correct. It goes up to 20,000. So that's basically the thinking. So it is a question of justice. And that's been a theme for me. And Madam Speaker, this was a potent theme for me during the time when the civil liberties of this country were suspended for 2 years. I remarked a few weeks ago when I was speaking here that I really couldn't understand how Bahamians really accepted that stuff with such, there was no outcry about it, okay, We voted for it once. Someone was trying to pin it on us. We voted for it once for the first thing for 2 weeks. And then we decided we couldn't support it anymore because it wasn't necessary. But people have to really take rights very seriously. The inconvenience, for example, of someone having to come from a jurisdiction, an island where there is no Supreme Court. And so if you want to prosecute something, that means you have to leave your island and you have to come here. And the cost of doing so. When we were in office last, there was a resident magistrate in the island of Exuma. Again, people fought long and hard for that to happen. And the people in Exuma thought of it as a sign that their community had grown and that they merited this important individual office being in Exuma. And then that was taken away. And so, again, people now have to, there's a circuit magistrate, but the circuit magistrate only gets there on specific occasions. And this is the case in many of our islands. So we have to be concerned as a parliament, as members of parliament, as public officials about the issues of justice. And I hope that these amendments will lead to justice. I have my classmate from St. Augustine's. I have two more famous and smarter classmates from St. Augustine's than me. One is Teresa Butler, who used to be the permanent secretary for the Prime Minister, and the other was Mike Barnett, who's the president of the Court of Appeal. And from the time he was a kid in school, it was clear he wanted to be a lawyer. I had never heard of Clarence Darrow. And we all had to give these speeches when we were in high school, 1965, St. Augustine's. And he chose to do Clarence Darrow's last address to the jury in the famous Scopes trial. I mean, he knew it word for word. I'd never heard of Clarence Darrow. So obviously this was something he wanted to do from a long time ago. In contradistinction, I did Mark Antony's speech to the Romans, friends, Romans, countrymen, so you knew what I wanted to do. And he just sent me a copy of a letter which his father wrote to the newspapers when he supported my position on capital punishment. His father, who supported capital punishment, former permanent secretary, wrote a letter about his own son, says he's not surprised at his son because he was always running around following Fred Mitchell at St. Augustine's doing foolishness or something that like. Mike saved the letter and he sent it to me. But the conversation I was having with him was, I was shocked to find that in order to prosecute an appeal on the civil side in the Court of Appeal, that you had to come up with something like $3,500. I was saying, well, I mean, who could do that? If there's a sense of injustice that something has happened to you, you have to find $3,500 to put an appeal. I mean, there must be something unjust about that. Now, the Privy Council, interestingly enough, has something called informa pauperis, which is a device, I believe, that allows people who cannot afford. Is that available on the civil side as well? Yeah, on the civil side and the criminal side, you can go informa pauperis, which is you don't have the money to do it, and so therefore there'll be a provision for you to do it, but not in the Court of Appeal. and not in the Supreme Court. You have to find the monies to do it. And so we have to look at justice. And that was a theme for me during the time when the liberties were suspended, when these fines were being imposed by people on people in circumstances that just seemed very odd to me, that notwithstanding the Parliament, the executive had provided for these fines, it just seemed very harsh. And certainly from their own side, there was a pushback on one of the penalties against a man who was convicted of selling coconuts without a license. I mean, that caused a huge furor. So we have to always be concerned about justice. That's the thing, not the technical things about, video links and all the rest of that. That's all fine. So one of the discussions I had in connection with the other bill and during this, during the pandemic, Madam Speaker, was when you have video trials, does this fulfill the provision in the Constitution for a trial which is in public? Is that in public? Now, in the old days, public meant you could go down to the court, sit in the gallery, and watch someone on trial. In fact, one of the reasons why I was told when I was in law school that they have the provision where every 7 days or so you have to appear before a magistrate if you're not bailed, is that you have to leave the prison, come to a public place where the public can see that you, who are in custody, you're still alive and well. And I said when I was talking to President Corpy, I said, is that really, when we do all of this video stuff, is that really fulfilling that pledge? Because, all kinds of things can be fixed up by video and by television. What you really want to do is to make sure that the justice appears in public. So when this was discussed in our own caucus, the provision was placed so that in criminal trials, the accused has to, you don't just impose video trials on him. The accused has a right to choose. So if he says, fine, I waive my rights, that's fine. But he has, in the normal course of things, the right to have a public trial. So that satisfies me, because I think we always have to be concerned about justice. Because at the end of the day, we are here to ensure that the system is as fair and equitable as it can be to all who appear before it. And I used to give examples. You can be as wealthy and powerful as you wish, have all the money you wish. You only have to see what happened to these billionaires in the Russian Federation. And as soon as they crossed the man who's the president, suddenly they had all sorts of problems with the law and jail sentences and no money at the end of the day. So a government, if it is determined to get you, can get you. As simple as every one of us probably has a US dollar bill in our pockets. And the law says you're not supposed to have them in your pocket. The regulation is you're supposed to, as soon as you get back to Nassau, go to the bank, what they call an authorized dealer, and turn in the US dollars. So presumably you are an offender if you have US dollars in your pocket. So if they won't get you on something, they can get you. In the United States, poor old Marcus Garvey, they used mail fraud to get him. And soon he was convicted and out of the United States and back in Jamaica. So the protection for us all is this intangible thing called the rule of law. And the rule of law simply means we have a set of regulations and codes which we all agree that that's the way we are going to operate. And we have an independent body that looks at those rules and says whether we are operating in conformity with those rules. And that is, as intangible as that is, as long as that social contract exists, that is our ultimate protection. Because if anybody comes against me, I know that we have a Chief Justice, a President of the Court of Appeal, Justices of Appeal, magistrates who will say, no, 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 that's not so. That is not so, and that cannot be so, and that they are the arbiters and protectors of it. And we must do everything we can to protect their work, to make sure that they are protected in their work. Some have argued that we need, for example, to go further with magistrates, which is to give them the same kind of protection which judges of the Supreme Court have. So there's this ongoing discussion. And I hope that when matters of this kind come up, that there is a larger discussion in our country over issues like justice. What is fair? What is equitable for people? Because it's an interesting development as we become more utilitarian in this era of the 21st century. In the 1970s, there were so many NGOs in this country that were actively engaged in advocating for things like justice. There was a Consumer Protection Association, for example. That's sort of disappeared. It's people for fighting for all sorts of causes. And you had younger members of the bar who were activists in so many aspects of life. And there are glimmers of hope today in all of those areas. And I just want to encourage particularly the members of Parliament who are first-termers to not be afraid to use the bully pulpit you have, which is a rare opportunity. I think I did the math. The 39 of us end up being something like 0.00016% or something like that of the population. And you work hard to get here. And when you get here, you know, the late Clifford Darling used to say, this is a slippery place. So you may not last long. But when you're here, you're supposed to use the opportunity to deliver things like justice and equity and fairness and advance the cause of the country. Country's going to be 50 years old next year. And we have someone who, I don't think you were born when independence came, and now is responsible for moving the presentation of that project next year to the world. And it'll be a great opportunity. The Minister of Sports announced today that the Carifta Games are going to be here. People may not remember how the Bahamas was actually responsible for the design of and the crafting of the Carifta Games as they now are, to make it this huge, huge pan-Caribbean festival of young people. And it is a testament to the work of people like Kendall Nottage, his brother Bernard Nottage, the B3As, Perry Christie, who is our former prime minister, that this thing developed here in the Bahamas and has become such a huge, huge event. And I saw the minister was talking about those ministers who travel. You know, investing in young people is important for our country. They are the future. And that's a truism, and it may be trite, but it's worth repeating. They are the future. And in a sense, there should be no price that we say we are not going to pay to make sure that they have a good future. It's as simple as that. And I've watched parents, those of you trying to attract voters, I always tell those who are doing door-to-door in my constituency, if you want to engage parents as voters, you talk about their children. Get them to talk about their children, you got them. You know, because everybody wants to see their children succeed. And it even goes to grandchildren, the grandmothers. I mean, because these days, inevitably you get a phone call. My grandson, my granddaughter. They used to say that young people really drive the electorate. But I found that when I went to the University of the Bahamas campus, every young person I ran into says, well, my Grammy told me, or my Grammy said this. So I said, well, I better speak to Grammy because I know who runs things. So we have to invest in young people as the future of our country, to encourage them to engage, because we believe that we're handing off a good country to them. And a lot of people put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to make this a successful product. So we are the keepers of the gate now, and I hope as we pass these statutes today, they say, I was looking at again, going back to my law school days, they say there are consolidating statutes, reforming statutes, amending statutes, codifying statutes, remedial statutes. Well, this is, what is this? This is a reforming statute. And this reform, I hope, will deliver justice for the Bahamian people. And there will be more to come. You heard the bill that was just laid this morning, which will deal with the question of what happens when perils exist and people simply disappear, and we have no way of dealing with those and their estates. So slowly by slowly, we chip away at this. But always, always keep in mind that we are here for justice, equity, and fairness. And I want to thank the team at the Attorney General's office, led by Senator Ryan Pinder, our own Member of Parliament for Centerville, for the work which they've done in crafting this, bringing this before the government, so that we can talk today about this matter. And I commend all of the pieces of legislation to the House, and let us hope that in its passage we deliver justice. Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I so second.
Thank you, Honourable Member. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to amend the Evidence Act. As many? The chair recognizes the Honourable Member for St. Anne's.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. The compendium bills before this House for debate include the Magistrates Court Amendment Bill, the Criminal Procedure Code Amendment Bill, the Juries Act Amendment Bill, and the Evidence Act Amendment Bill. Madam Speaker, we've just come through the Easter holiday period, and on reflection, I'm going to share with this honorable House a time when in the evening we would go to sleep and wake the next day to the report of a shooting or a death occurring in the early morning hours after we had gone to sleep. Madam Speaker, those days have transformed into what we now shockingly see, where we have shootings in broad daylight, gang members blasting gang members, and horrifically, most recently, women shooting women. They say that guns don't kill people, people kill people. I say, Madam Speaker, get the guns off the street. I say that we should go into every yard and every building, every home, and get them all. People found in possession of an illegal weapon can be charged or not charged. Get the guns. Illegal substances and other materials found during the raids can be confiscated with no charges. Just get the guns. Madam Speaker, 2 young men were almost killed in my constituency Sunday evening on April 3rd. Bullets snapped away like the sound of a BPL transformer sparking off. The 2 young men were rushed to hospital by private vehicle, one with his intestines bulging out. And from that incident, 2 lives have been shattered, 2 families have been devastated, and a community, Madam Speaker, is in fear, not knowing what to expect next. Madam Speaker, the constituency office in the great, esteemed, highly regarded constituency of St. Anne's was hit no less than 3 times. A building which last held summer camp for the community children back in 2019 now has a shattered window, a smeared wall where melting metal painted its path, and that now marks, Madam Speaker, the manner of our bearing. Madam Speaker, it is believed that this may be the mark of our nation until we remove the guns from the streets. It is believed that this may be the mark of our bearing until we can protect our young men and women from the temptation of retribution that destroys their future. Until our laws empower our police to arrest criminals without a formal complaint from the victim, we're swinging at justice, Madam Speaker, with 2 hands tied behind our back. There is a fear imposed on the victims of crimes that is so severe, it is crippling our judicial system. When a victim of a crime has to make a complaint in order for justice to be met, crime has a license to go free. That, Madam Speaker, is undeniable. The moment a victim cannot take any more than what they have already been subjected to, and fear forces their withdrawal from making a complaint, that crime is licensed and that crime is free. Madam Speaker, we don't expect a perfect society where there is no crime, but we expect a protected society. A protected society where the victim's role in justice is not exasperated, but the victim's role is alleviated. Where what is asked of them today will be a burden lifted off of them tomorrow. Where having survived the crime is all that will be asked of them. It can be done, Madam Speaker. If our system does not require a complaint from a murdered person our system can carry out justice for all victims without a formal complaint. Think of it, Madam Speaker. If a crime has been committed and a statement given to the police have enough to determine to bring charges or not. In a protected society, there is no reason a victim should be responsible for a criminal being charged with an offense. After all, the act perpetrated by the criminal was as a result of their own decisions. Their prosecution should not be subjected to a complaint being made and further putting that victim at greater risk. Not only is that victim at greater risk, but if that victim doesn't do what our laws currently require and make a complaint, that individual that perpetrated that crime is licensed and free to commit that crime again. The consequences of an arrest and being charged should be the result of police action, and the prosecution should be the result of the prosecution's department and the Director of Public Prosecution's actions. Justice should not depend on the victim to be subjected in a protected society to more than they have already been subjected to. A criminal has no one to blame for the course of justice brought against them but themselves. And Madam Speaker, when I look at the compendium of legislation before us now, the one that brings us closer to this idea of a protected society tomorrow is the Evidence Amendment Bill of 2022. And Madam Speaker, I'm going to bring some attention to certain aspects of this Evidence Amendment Bill of 2022. I think it's very important, Madam Speaker, for us as representatives in the House of the Legislature, that we not only pass legislation that's in the benefit and best interests of our society and our people, but that our people are aware of the legislation that has been passed. I, Madam Speaker, even as an attorney and a former practicing criminal defense attorney, wasn't aware of the extent of the availability of evidence to be given by live television link. Now that was passed by this House in 2000 and I think it was 2011. It was 2011. So since 2011, members of the public that are involved in criminal cases before the court still have to, as they do today, make a formal complaint for a charge to be brought. But since 2011, they've been able to give evidence by television link subject to certain circumstances and conditions. Now, for the most part, Madam Speaker, aside from expanding the definition of television link so that it now can include video link, because everything is being done by computers these days, Madam Speaker, there were some additional provisions since 2011 that have been added to this amendment bill that we're debating today. And they're worth highlighting, Madam Speaker, because I think they touch on this idea of a protected society, where not only do we have justice, but we're protecting the persons that crimes have been committed against. And if we looked at Section 4 of the amendment bill, it refers to Section 78A, which is essentially the same, and it refers to Section 78B, which is essentially the same in its entirety, subsections 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, except now at Section 78B1C. This is an entirely new section that didn't exist before. So this amendment bill actually does more than simply provide for a revised definition and changing the application of that definition throughout the bill, and ultimately, when passed, throughout the Act. By Section 78B1, subheading Evidence by Video Link by Witness in Criminal Proceedings. 1. Any person may give evidence by way of video link in criminal proceedings to which this part applies. A, whether the witness is within or outside the Bahamas. B, whether the witness is a child, an elderly person, or an otherwise vulnerable person. And C, this is what has been added, where the quality of evidence to be given by the witness is likely to be diminished by reason of fear or distress on the part of the witness in having to physically testify in proceedings in court. So now, Madam Speaker, we are recognizing the state in which our citizens are left after a crime has been committed on them, and even after pressing a charge. If it is in the discretion of the court that the quality of evidence to be given by the witness is likely to be diminished by reason of fear, then they qualify to give evidence by live video link. That's Section 78B1C. By Section 78C, evidence by way of video link by the accused. Since 2011, the law has been that 78C1, except with his consent and subject to subsection 2, the trial of a person for a criminal offense, including the giving of evidence by him on his own behalf, shall not take place by video link unless subsection A is not changed. Subsection A reads, he so conducts himself as to render the continuation of the proceedings in the physical space of the court impractical. So in that instance, if the accused can't conduct himself in a reasonable manner within the court, he would be required to give evidence by video link. But now, Madam Speaker, instead of putting a victim in a room with the perpetrator, that accused may not be in the actual court. If the court, Madam Speaker, by this new amendment, is satisfied and gives a direction that it is in the interest of justice for the accused to appear and give evidence by video link. And it is this, Madam Speaker, which stands out to me as one step towards this protected society that I think we all want our citizens to understand and eventually live in. What this does, Madam Speaker, is this gives a discretion beyond the behavior and good conduct of the accused person to the court to determine this is the type of crime, and the witness, the victim who is participating in the crime does not need to be in the room with the accused. The accused can be asked to leave in the interests of justice. And Madam Speaker, we have a justice system that no longer is inclined to sentence murderers to death. We have a approach to the sentencing where I think most of us are familiar now with this term, the worst of the worst. So if you commit the worst of the worst offenses, murder is not even the worst of the worst apparently anymore. It has to be gruesome, or I'm not even sure what qualifies as being the worst of the worst, because even Kofi Goodman ultimately had his death sentence reversed, and the crime that he was convicted of against the young Archer boy, in my mind, should easily have been seen as the worst of the worst. So for too long, Madam Speaker, our justice system has moved in the direction of protecting an accused, has for too long allowed crime to be licensed and go free. What we're doing with this amendment to the evidence bill is a small step in the right direction. We should, however, recognize that in these 5 years, we need to be taking leaps in favor of our people, leaps towards not only an economically prosperous country, but to a protective society where we don't require more than our people can give after they've been the victim of crimes. So, Madam Speaker, another improvement to this process is found in Section 5 of the amendment bill, and it refers back to what I was talking about before with Section 78B(1)(c). So now, Madam Speaker, we're again seeing our justice system moving towards a protective society. By subsection 5, subheading evidence of witness on grounds of fear and distress. Subsection 1 reads, in determining whether a witness falls within subsection 78B(1)(c), the court shall take into account the nature and alleged circumstances of the offense to which the proceedings relate, the age of the witness, C, such of the following matters as appear to the court to be relevant, namely, Roman numeral 1, the social and cultural background and the ethnic origins of the witness, Roman numeral 2, the domestic and employment circumstances of the witness, and Roman numeral 3, any religious beliefs or political opinions of the witness. Those don't smack me automatically as areas that could clearly disrupt the participation and the course of justice, but by subsection D, that section continues, and this is what's important to me, Madam Speaker. This is what I view as taking into consideration our citizens who have had crimes committed against them. So by 5, subsection 1, in determining whether a witness falls within subsection 78B(1)(c), the court shall take into account by subsection D any aggressive or threatening behavior towards the witness on the part of a party to the proceedings, members of the family or associates of the accused, or any other person who is likely to be an accused or a witness in the proceedings. And in determining the question in paragraph 1, the court must in addition consider any views expressed by the witness. Here, by this section, once again, this amendment bill provides and recognizes the state that our victims are left in. And if it is, it also goes beyond recognizing the state that our victims are left in, but it recognizes the behavior of our own people. It's not unique to Bahamians. It's not unique to the Bahamas. I think it's a crime strategy that's surfaced many decades ago in other areas where aggression and intimidation are often used to deter witnesses from giving evidence, resulting in accused persons being found not guilty either as a result of charges being dropped or a lack of evidence that can prove the case against them beyond a reasonable doubt. Madam Speaker, what we're doing here today with this piece of legislation is we're giving support to the victims of crimes. We're recognizing the realities of our society, and we're moving toward a protected society. I want us to do more in these next 5 years, 4.5 years. But I think, Madam Speaker, that this bill before the House today in the evidence amendment bill is one that is taking a step in the right direction. Madam Speaker, I would propose that we continue to examine how a victim can be less involved in justice, in the prosecution of cases against criminals than we presently require them to be. I said before that murderers don't have to testify, and there's a vast amount of cases, Madam Speaker, assault charges, armed robberies, where there's evidence that can be significant enough to lead to convictions. And just because a victim decides that they want to withdraw the evidence should not be a get-out-of-jail-free card for the criminal. We have to be proactive in how we protect our people and how we protect the society and how we change the mindset of our young persons, men and women, that retribution is not going to go unpunished, and retribution really is no longer going to be an option in this society. You have people that will commit crimes, Madam Speaker, and will say through intimidation or through an elimination of witnesses, I'll beat this case, I'll beat this rap. The days of accepting that, the worst of the worst has no definition, those are days of the past, Madam Speaker. In these next 4.5 years, we need to put the laws in place so that there's clarity and protection for all of our people, so that we can reverse the course that we wake up to in the morning, and that is lawlessness at night. And we can put a roadblock in front of what is becoming now lawlessness during the day in our great Bahama land. Madam Speaker, with that said, I confirm my support of the compendium pieces of legislation, the Evidence Amendment Bill of 2002, the Juries Amendment Bill of 2002, the Magistrates Court Act Amendment Bill of 2002, and the Criminal Procedure Code Amendment Bill of 2002 of 2022. Madam Speaker, on another occasion, I'll extend remarks from my constituency, but I think because of the seriousness that we've been entrusted with in moving this nation towards a protected society and alleviating the pressures that are put on victims of crimes, that I want the focus of this honorable House to remain on that and nothing more. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. As many, the Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Nassau Village.
Good morning, Madam Speaker, Honorable Prime Minister, parliamentary colleagues, the entire Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and of course, my family, my people, my great constituents of Nassau Village. I say good morning. Madam Speaker, today I rise on behalf of the passionate and unyielding constituents of Nassau Village, for without their unwavering support and dedication, I would not be here today as their proud representative. Madam Speaker, just a short 7 months ago, the residents of the constituency of Nassau Village elected me to bring forth responsive representation, reliable representation, and innovative representation. Today, I also rise on behalf of the millennials of the Bahamas, proving that it can be done. I reiterate and exclaim that we remain hungry, ready to lead, and help usher in a new day for the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Madam Speaker, before we get to the crux of my contribution, I beg leave to brag and boast just a little about my dear constituency, which is currently experiencing unprecedented and enjoying major infrastructural upgrades. After years of stagnation, Madam Speaker, and very little development, just 1 month after being elected, immediate roadworks began, with the complete resurfacing and repaving of the Alexandria Boulevard as requested by constituents. Madam Speaker, I pride myself on being a representative who listens to their people. Just 5 months ago, we witnessed the extensive replacement of broken streetlights throughout the Gleniston Park and Jonathan Square communities. Madam Speaker, I'm referring to streetlights that have been out for so long that the residents believe that they're only there for decoration. That is a reality. Just 2 months ago, Madam Speaker, we witnessed the complete retrofitting of all of the rusted pipes along the entire Taylor Street thoroughfare, and now, presently, as we speak, the entire Taylor Street thoroughfare and entrance of Nassau Village is being completely resurfaced and repaved. You see, Madam Speaker, above all, we have been sent to this honorable house to listen to our constituents and present what we would have heard to this august body, so that policies can be developed to improve the daily lives of each of our constituents. Madam Speaker, on a more somber note, my constituency, despite being identified as an area that needs major social, infrastructural, and occupational development by the Citizen Security Justice Program experts under the IDB, remains devoid of a library, a clinic, a police station, and still does not have the most basic social intervention tool, a community center, to detract from the trappings of gang recruitment and gang activities. I say to my constituents, I remain committed to rectifying this issue. Madam Speaker, on a brighter note, in an attempt to socially develop and provide opportunities for all Nassau villages, I will be partnering to bring the Mobile Trade School to the constituency, along with representatives from the Small Business Development Center, the Bahamas Development Bank, the Ministry of Labor, to bring about the first ever, as we titled it, Block Traffic Skills Registration Drive, to be held on the 30th of April on Alexandria Boulevard from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. To my dear constituents, I wish to remind you of our quarterly meetings that will be held on the 27th at 7 p.m. at Sadie Curtis Primary. I encourage you all to attend, and I look forward to reconnecting, and above all, listening to your concerns, as I remain committed to continuously lobbying for the much-needed constituency upgrades, and will continue to assist and help inform immediate policy reform. Madam Speaker, I reaffirm that listening is the essence of what it truly means to be a representative, a servant of the people, selected by the people, for the people. Madam Speaker, I view policy as being alive, a living, breathing entity. Therefore, it goes without saying that it should be constantly given attention to ensure and preserve its relevancy and its efficacy. Madam Speaker, to the crux of my contribution, the table compendium of bills is a progressive action by this New Day administration towards streamlining outdated and deficient existing legislation. We have heard previous discussions about modernizing, bringing ineffective legislation into the modern day, making them current, making them relevant, making them effective. That, Madam Speaker, is the exercise presented here today. This is what was referred to by my learned colleague from the honorable member from Freetown, with the inclusion of video links to provide for evidence submission. Following approval of these bills, Madam Speaker, we would have all contributed to a pragmatic approach to resolving some of the vexing and annoying issues in the judicial system. Madam Speaker, if no one else can attest for the annoyances that can be incurred when one engages the judicial system, I can, on behalf of my constituents, confidently saying that it will be a relief to know that the amount threshold of civil cases will be increased, making it easier for a civil case to be heard by the lower courts instead of having to wait on these long and have these protracted exercises of securing a Supreme Court date. Madam Speaker, I believe that these are the progressive actions toward solving our present-day challenges. This is an indication that the small man, Madam Speaker, is being considered for the first time in years. For the first time in a very long time, the everyday Bahamian is at the center of consideration, and true due process can take place, and persons are allowed to simply get on with their lives. Madam Speaker, I deem this a progressive justice system. Madam Speaker, I reaffirm the policy and legislation must be constantly reviewed to ensure their relevancy and efficacy. It makes no sense, and it is complete nonsense, to believe that laws will magically metamorph and move with the times. So I'm delighted, and I was delighted to have and been privy to the discussions of each of these bills geared towards progressing our judicial system. Therefore, Madam Speaker, I am honored to strike a blow for modernization and true development by supporting this compendium of bills that will undoubtedly bring about change and the much-needed relief throughout the judicial system. In closing, Madam Speaker, I wish to extend heartfelt condolences to the Nottage and Hunt families on the loss of their loved ones, and also to all of the families of Nassau Village who may be in bereavement at this time. I thank you all once again for giving this Soldier Road boy a chance to bring true, responsive, reliable, and innovative representation to this House. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you, Honourable Member. As many.
There you go.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Long Island.
Mr. Deputy, President, good afternoon. Mr. Deputy, I rise on behalf of the great, hard-working people of Long Island, people who have sent me to this place yet again to serve their interests. Mr. Deputy, by way of update, I want to inform my people that I have spoken to the honourable member for Port Charlotte this morning, and he has given me assurances that his ministry is reviewing the current roadworks on the island, and there's a potential that there will be additional roadworks, hopefully, in the future, and I want to thank you, Port Charlotte, for that. He's also assured me that the ministry, more particularly the Ministry of Tourism and Aviation, is reviewing the airport, and we remain hopeful, given the groundworks already undertaken during the previous administration, that the airport project will be signed. And I look forward to having more positive news to report in the coming weeks and months. Mr. Deputy, I want to extend condolences to a few of my constituents on the passing of some of their family members. Deacon Patrick Darville recently passed. He was an outstanding church leader in the Catholic Church in Long Island. Deacon Darville, I must say he was an outstanding Long Islander, outstanding human being. He was one way all the time. A loyal supporter and a community builder. I thank him, and I thank his family for his service. I extend condolences to his children, Patrick, Papa George Dowell, Darrell and Jared Dowell, Sandra, and Dr. Phyllis Dowell, Melanie Knowles, and Lillian Forsythe, who is a noted teacher on the island. So, Deputy, I also want to extend condolences to the family of Mr. Damien Trico, who passed a few days ago, his wife Katie, and his daughter Amanda, and to the entire Trico family in Hamilton's Long Island. Now, Mr. Damien Trico was a classmate, a schoolmate of my grandfather. I remember my grandfather always talking about their years growing up together in Hamilton's in the Scrub Hill area. And I remember the appreciation on his face for that relationship. They maintained that relationship for many, many years, long after they both had left school and gone on to live their lives. And lastly, Mr. Deputy, I want to give my condolences to the family of Miss Vivian Fox, who passed a few days ago. To the entire family, the Salt Pond community, I extend my condolences. Mr. Deputy, this weekend, Monday, as I was coming back from Long Island, I was on the flight with Richard Lightbourne, a former member for Montague. And Richard commented to me about the proliferation of election signs by my challenger during the last election. We've asked repeatedly that these signs be removed, the billboards, and they're really littering the island at this point, and they're becoming an eyesore. And I want to say to the member for Cat Island, please impress upon the gentleman to remove those signs with a view to reducing the litter on the island. And, election is over. We'll have an opportunity to put those signs back up again. Mr. Deputy, I also have some queries with respect to urban renewal on the island, particularly for the member for Grand Bahama, West Grand Bahama. We are curious to know when the office would be reopened. Urban renewal served quite a notable purpose on the island. And, we still have persons who worked in the office under the previous iteration, staff, who've not been paid. The manager, the island manager, is still owed her gratuity. And, they were unceremoniously, in my estimation, removed. And I think if this happens, and I said before in this place, governments have the right to put in place those persons who they see fit to carry out their agenda. However, if we're going to do these things, I believe that these persons should be compensated. And if gratuity is owed, as is owed, to the island manager, former island manager for urban renewal, I think she should be compensated. So I call upon the member to look into that for me. I thank you. Mr. Deputy, these bills today represent a positive improvement, or positive improvements to the judicial system. And frankly, I commend the government for moving these pieces of legislation. We appreciate these bills, but we want to know about the more expansive and nationalistic crime-fighting plan. We see that crime in the Bahamas is out of control. We have been seeing 2-3 murders per day for the last few weeks. Male and female gunmen, gunwomen, male and female knivesmen or kniveswomen, people carrying sharp weapons and using them. So the fear factor is quite high in our society. And if we are to be honest, going to the barber shops and the beauty salons, the highways and the byways, you can tell that the public is not quite comfortable with the current state of crime in the Bahamas. As I said earlier, Mr. Deputy, I welcome any measure that increases the efficiency of the courts. As an officer of the court myself, when there are thousands of cases in backlog, it means that justice is denied. And there are many thousands as we speak. And so any avenue, any effort to alleviate that backlog is most welcome. But in the case of these bills, they can go further, much further, towards modernizing the system. In fact, if you look at the Court Services Bill, if passed, this bill would give to judiciary the power to better budget, maintain, and operate its facilities. Very much like the bill that concerns the Parliament, both of which would undergird and underpin the separation of powers. Mr. Speaker, or Mr. Deputy, a more independent judiciary is consistent with our Constitution. The same applies to the legislative branch of government. As I stated earlier, the separation of powers is a very real, or in very real and tangible ways, is key to our democracy. That is the only way we would have true democracy as defined by the Constitution. Mr. Deputy, with respect to the amendment to the Juries Act, this amendment is a step in the right direction. But let's be honest, all of us in here have heard family members, constituents, people in the barbershop and beauty salons and elsewhere speaking about how afraid they are, how nervous they are to sit on juries. Many are deathly afraid, and everyone in here has heard at least one person speak to this. There's a notable lack of confidence in the system. Lord Devlin, famous justice in the United Kingdom, and all of us who are lawyers can speak to the case law that his rulings have underpinned and fomented. Lord Devlin famously declared that the jury is the lamp that shows that freedom lives. Jury service is widely accepted as an important public duty. Citizen participation by voting via elections and undertaking jury service underpins our democracy. Frankly, layperson participation in the legal system is not only enshrined in our Constitution, but it is considered to be central to a healthy democracy. Indeed, the amendments to repeal the requirements to publish prospective jurors' names in newspapers or at the post office and their home addresses is welcome. Many persons have expressed concern about juror intimidation, threats, bribes, or the deliberate tainting of jurors or the jury pool because too much information is in the public domain. And we saw this when and I welcomed the change with the licensing of motor vehicles, where we once had too much information on the decals. Too much information, Mr. Deputy, has been made available as it stands with respect to a juror's home address and personal information, and their families. It makes their families accessible to persons who might have ill intent. But I think these amendments could go even further, because whilst we speak to them or the address is no longer being there, I still see data protection issues. You have the full name of a juror being published. You have their date of birth still being published, and we know that this can lead to fraud and other issues. So while removing the address, the home address is good, what about the other concerns? Mr. Deputy, the question now comes as to how people will be notified beyond the website. Because formerly, names were published in the newspapers. Names will be published at the Family Island Administrator's Office. And now we're just talking about having names published on a website. So what's the workaround for those persons who don't have access to that website? Are there going to be persons calling folks up? How will this work in practice? Will it be equally effective, given that the information will just be solely placed on a website? Should jurors be given a degree of protection, depending on the nature of cases, with considerations being had for that? Should we reduce the number of jurors required in certain cases? We know that the selection process, those of us in practice know the selection process when it comes to the jury pool can be molasses-like, can be quite frustrating. And then let's look at facilities for jurors. The facilities that juries utilize are in desperate need of improvement. The bathrooms are inferior. The jury room is inferior, and we all know this, those of us who practice, deplorable conditions. We've all heard the complaints. You know, I've heard in practice where pencils and pens, pads, notepads are not readily available for jurors. Where there's fussing over who's going to pay for this or that. And this is why it's so valuable for the courts to have greater control over their own facilities and their own budget. Mr. Deputy, with regard to the magistrate, the amendments to the Magistrate Act, I know that this jurisdiction is being opened up to hear cases or more cases, and I think that has some benefits, some pluses and some minuses. I note that we're talking about increasing fees at the magistrate level. And I believe that with respect to these increases, we've talked about no new taxes. But how will these fees impact the poorest among us? These are the people who predominantly use the magistrate court. And whilst we speak about increasing the threshold of cases that a magistrate can hear, are we going to expand the magistracy? Because we know right now we have challenges with the magistrate court. First, they raised VAT, and now they're hidden in a tax. I call it a hidden tax by raising fees in the magistrate court. Poor people must now find more money to pay court fees. We know that inefficiencies are evident at the magistrate court. So how does one increase the threshold of matters that can be heard without fixing the existing problems? Sometimes you walk into the magistrate court complex and you see people standing up, leaning alongside the wall, full to capacity. And we must address the issue of the routine lateness of magistrates as well. Because I think the Act speaks to starting court at 9:30, if I'm not mistaken. That's there. Then you have attorneys who sometimes contribute to delays by double and triple booking cases. This was in this court, but this was in that court too, in the other court. And we know who some of those attorneys are. We know who some of them. We know the identity of many of those attorneys. We talk about warrants, bench warrants, not being issued. And then, of course, there's the issue in the magistrate court, and this should also be addressed as it relates to court reporters. We can't have magistrates in 2022 still taking handwritten notes in a notebook, in a diary. And folks must request a copy, a photocopy of that, and rely on that if you have to appeal. We should have court reporters assigned to every single court in the Bahamas. Every court. That is desperately needed so that lawyers can readily access transcripts. No question about it. I welcome the amendments as it relates to video links and people being able to give evidence from another jurisdiction, from a family island. That's welcomed. Very, very welcomed. But there are varied administrative and organizational challenges that currently face the court system at large, and more particularly the magistrate court, that must be addressed. There's a need across the board, at all levels of the judicial system, for court administrators to improve the administration of the court so that we see greater case management, which would lend to the alleviation of this backlog that has been plaguing the judicial system for so many years. So as we double, triple, and quadruple the workload of the magistrate by increasing the threshold from 5,000, how do we address the current matters and those that will now come before a magistrate? Is the government going to appoint new magistrates? Will we have a significant cash injection in the judicial system? Is the government building a new court complex to accommodate the new magistrates, to accommodate the number of cases, the number of persons? Because I talked about people being lining up against the wall. Packed to capacity. What about circuit magistrates? To my knowledge, a circuit magistrate has not been to my constituency since 2019. And the administrators are being discouraged from hearing cases. I've had 2 administrators in recent time, both of whom are attorneys, experienced attorneys. And I believe that I see no reason why, in terms of small matters, you have small matters, you can give guidelines. You have matters in some of these family island constituencies, Mr. Deputy, where you're talking about someone, dog got away and killed 2 of the next person's sheep. You don't have to wait on a magistrate to fly into the island to deal with something as simple as that. And yes, we do need lay magistrates who are also JPs. This can help with the administration of justice. Indeed, the family islands must be given a greater degree of autonomy in dealing with its own affairs, and minor matters could be dealt with on the island. In my case, you don't have to have islands like mine where a circuit magistrate hasn't been or attended since 2019. Frankly, the family islands don't clog up the judicial calendar. That's mostly Nassau and Freeport, Grand Bahama. Most minor matters on the family islands can be dealt with appropriately and effectively on the ground. So maybe would we move to hire a separate group of circuit magistrates? We move to hire lay magistrates? We have to do something to move these matters along. Mr. Deputy, magistrates, as we know, lack judicial tenure. And we know, and there's some concern with respect to outside influence of the magistracy, promises of elevation to another level, threats to send them back to OAG or some other place. We know that as well. So how do we make these persons feel more secure? Even more, Mr. Deputy, judicial clerks should be assigned to all magistrates. To all magistrates. In fact, judicial...
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Fort Charlotte.
I'd like to hear the point of order.
On a point of order, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it's astounding to hear an allegation being made in the House of Assembly that the judiciary is subject to manipulation, interference, and unless the member has some evidence, I would hope that as an officer of the court, the member would withdraw those. It's an allegation, and it goes right to the heart of our democracy and the independence of the judiciary. Please, the member has just stated that
as well known, I certainly do not know of interference. You've heard? Mr. Deputy Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to make an allegation against a co-equal branch of the government, which is the judiciary, which has the protection he has heard. I mean, why would we come here? Why would we come here and say, I have heard? I mean, I hear things all the times. I mean, but I would not get up in Parliament and make a general allegation against the judiciary based on what I've heard. But, I mean, I think the appropriate thing, to justify that.
As the Honourable Member for Long Island.
Mr. Deputy, no allegation was made against the judiciary. This member is misleading the House. I stated that due to magistrates not having security of tenure, and listen, let's be real. I mean, if we want to go back a few years, there was an allegation made some years ago, and I didn't want to go here, about a magistrate on a family island being intimidated by a member of the executive branch. Okay? That is well published. That is well published. That's well known. Okay? Well known. Well known. Well known, Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy, judicial clerks. I'm of the view, Mr. Deputy, the judicial clerks should be assigned to every...
One minute. Honourable members, the time now is 1 o'clock.
Madam, Mr. Deputy, to allow the member to complete by clock, he has less than 8 minutes and will suspend upon his completion.
Is there a seconder? Second. It's been moved and seconded that the Honourable Member for Long Island continue, that the business of the House continue beyond 1 o'clock. As many in favour will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The business of the House continues. The Honourable Member for Long Island.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy, as I was stating, I'm of the view that judicial clerks, that is trained attorneys, should be assigned to every member of the judiciary at all levels to assist them with writing of judgments, research, to assist with moving along cases faster. Mr. Deputy, we certainly need more judicial clerks at the level of the Supreme Court. We've heard of lots of temp employees currently in the judiciary, and I think that too must be addressed. Making these persons permanent by giving the court more power to control its own facilities, its own budget, these matters will be addressed. Mr. Deputy, again, given the rise in the threshold of cases before the magistrate, are we having a separate set of circuit magistrates to address matters on the family islands? Will there be additional hiring of magistrates? Will we have a new designated complex for magistrates? You see, this increase in workload and the increase in responsibility for already dysfunctional courts, where we have notable backlogs, we need a commitment from government that goes further, that seeks to remedy the systemic problems that already plague these courts. And so whilst this legislation is enacted, or whilst before probably these bills that will be law, before they come into effect, these matters should also be addressed. Otherwise, this process would be tantamount to putting the cart before the horse. Mr. Deputy, a wider group of matters. And I must say, one of the pluses coming from these amendments is a wider group of society can now take matters before the court. More persons will now have the opportunity to judicially settle disputes without having to worry about costs being levied against them. And I believe, whilst we're making these amendments, government should also embark upon possibly an informational campaign on what are causes of action so that persons would know what to do when they have a cause of action. Mr. Deputy, as I conclude, with respect to the amendments to the Evidence Act, I know that these amendments only apply to criminal matters, and they act should also have been amended so that the civil matters at the magistrate's level.
That's what it's all about.
What does it say? What does it say? What does it say? What does it say? Mr. Deputy, let me say this. Most courts, we know that entire trials are being done at the Supreme Court and at the Court of Appeal. Anglican, believe me, I need no assistance. No assistance, Anglican, except to get those additional teachers and that special education teacher. I appreciate that. I'm happy to know, Mr. Deputy, given the video link, the amendment with respect to video link, that we will no longer be seeing speeding buses running through downtown and East New Providence and jeopardizing the lives of passengers and passers-by and drivers, motorists, where prisoners are being carted to and from the Bahamas Department of Corrections. And so, with that note, and with these recommendations, Mr. Deputy, I note my support for the bills, and I also strongly advise a further consideration be given to going even further to making the judicial system more efficient and far more effective than it is today. Thank you, Mr. Deputy.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for West Grand Bahama and Bimini.
Mr. Deputy, we now move for the suspension for lunch to resume at 3 o'clock this afternoon.
Is there a seconder? Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the business of the House be suspended until 3 p.m. As many are in favor, will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The business of the House stands suspended to 3 p.m.
All right. No, he wants it. Yeah, he said, how would they know? Yeah, right. Same point, Mr. Reyes. Yeah.